Blair here, welcoming you back to another episode of Back to the Past. Today I'm back at home in Colorado. I've got to spend some necessary time here earning some money with a job again. But in that amount of time that I'm here, I would like to be able to be productive for the place in Arkansas. And I got to thinking, one thing that I do need down there is a bed. So far, I have been basically sleeping and camping on the ground, but now I have the rodent problems taken care of to where they're not infesting the cabin anymore, so I can start coming up with a few of the creature comforts. So I want something that will fit into the 19th century era as to back when that was built. So I think I've come up with an idea using rough sawn lumber and then using some of these grapevines. I will end up incorporating some joinery and some techniques that they may have used back in 1850, and at the very least make it look appropriate to the setting, so that when someone walks into my cabin, hey, there's a bed. Looks like it was built in 1850. These grapevines are somewhat invasive. On my property, I've got a lot of them. That is here on the sawhorse, it came from a vine that had grown well up into the trees, well into several trees. It was over 200 feet in length, probably close to 300 feet. So I decided to bring some of that back and incorporate those into this bed that I'll be making. So I've got some pretty cool looking pieces here. One that I think on the headboard will work across the top, and then immediately below that one, let's hide a few pieces. Immediately below that one will be this arched piece, which I think should make things look pretty darn spectacular. And then also there is a piece that I brought back that is just too cool not to use. I'm not sure how I'll incorporate it, but how can you have something like that and not use it? So anyway, I will be putting this stuff away for now. I'll eventually have to peel them. I'll be putting the vines away for now and bringing out some of my rough sawn lumber and get started cutting that. I hope you stick around. I'm back, and I think I'm fairly set up here. Got all my rough sawn lumber ready to go. Stuff that I cut on the wood miser. I have squared up all the ends. I have my cut list. I have my square. I have my pencil. And I got my other pencil for when I lose this one. So let's get started sawing. First of all, posts. For the footboard, I need 2 pieces, 32 inches long. plan to incorporate some mortise and tenon joints, which I'll explain more in a little while. I want this to be easy to haul down there in pieces and not have to haul down there assembled. So I will make the headboard separate, the footboard separate, and then the side rails separate, kind of like we would do today when we buy a ready-made bed. Back in those days, having to move a cabin wasn't uncommon. They tried to stay somewhere in the area, but they made their log cabins to where they could easily move the cabin. And of course, all their furniture was to where it could be easily moved too. So they would have made something take apart, and almost certainly would have been done with mortise and tenon joints, which have been used for hundreds of years. My next two pieces are the side rails, which need to be cut at 88 inches. Those are all the major components in this. I'll have some more short pieces and some supports to put in afterward. The one thing I need to do yet is to cut the tenons on the ends of the side rails. So I need to cut back about 6 inches. The width of the board right now, I am using a 5/4 thick, which is 1.25 inches by 5-inch wide side rail. I'll end up taking a shoulder out of these about 1 inch off of each edge in order to make a 3-inch tenon that will go through the 3-inch by 1.25 inch mortise that'll be cut into the posts. I have the shoulder cuts laid out for the tenons. Let's cut those. That takes care of all of the major cuts. Most of the rest of this is going to be hand work and some machine work with drilling holes for the tenons to fit into. So stick around, and I don't know that I'll even get to that today. I have other things to do, but if not, good morning. I had hoped to be able to go to work at my paying job today, but we got about 4 inches of snow overnight, so that's not going to work. I figured I would come out and get started on preparing these posts and the rails for the mortise and tenon joints that will hold these together. Before we get started on doing any layout though, let's take a look at what a mortise and tenon joint is. The mortise and tenon joinery that I plan to do on this bed will be temporary and put together with wedges. And in that way I can pull the wedges, disassemble it, reassemble it somewhere else by driving the wedges back in after assembly. About 30 years ago I built a post and beam construction house, and all the joints were put together as mortise and tenons. In that, since it wasn't temporary and needed to be taken apart for reassembly, rather than using wedges, holes were drilled through the beam and post connections, and then a wooden dowel, a hardwood dowel, driven into it to keep it from coming apart. In some of the older construction, they used either that technique or those joints were often bolted. We'll get started here and do some layout as to exactly where these holes are going to go. I decided I'll start with the tenon cuts. And I'll try this first of all by hand. See if I can get up on top and make a square cut. I was told by an old carpenter that you guide the saw blade by using whichever finger you think the least of. That has them cut. Now to clean them up a little bit with a chisel. Well, if I was able to cut all of these just perfectly, any one of these ends should fit any one of these posts, but being cut by hand, that may not be perfect, that may not be true. So what I'll probably do is number each end for the corresponding hole in the post and sort of custom fit everything together. Really not a big deal. In the end, when I go to assembly, it'll never show. I'll put the marks on the inside. Right now, I'm getting hungry and I need some lunch. Talk to you soon. Well, finally, after 2 long weeks of this February Arctic blast, it's breaking down. Finally becoming tolerable out here, back to short sleeve weather. I finished getting the mortises cut in all the posts. One, I've gone ahead and squared it up. This mortise I'm not proud of. The one thing that I did when I drilled these are to drill from both sides. This one had something in it that I didn't realize, is that it's not, this side is not parallel to this side. So as I drilled through from each side, the hole got a little bit exaggerated, like this. So it's not a pretty hole, or not a pretty mortise, but it works. And I have the tenon that will fit it right here. So this is how the rail will look inserted to the post, if you can just imagine this turn 90 degrees. I've checked it for square this way and that way, and it's in pretty good shape. Like I say, the mortise that I cut isn't something I'm real proud of, but it's not going to be seen anyway, so it should be okay. My next step with this piece, once I get these other mortises completed, is to cut this wedge in half and essentially drill a hole, another square mortise, through the top of this for this wedge to be driven into, and thus tighten this joint and to hold it in place. So I'll go ahead and keep going with squaring up the mortises on the remainder. I'll get that out in a moment, I guess. I'll square up the mortises on the remainder of these posts. What I will do is to use a speed square to square off the tops of my cuts, also mark the edges so that my corners are defined. And then I'll use the utility knife to score across the grain. Do that a couple of times. And that is really just to prevent splintering as I start into it with the wood chisel. I'm back, and I have started to build the headboard and the footboard. At least I've got something now that I know what the frame is going to look like. Everything seems to be fitting together well. These top pieces are just laying there. But now I need to get started. My next step, of course, will be to do some of the decorative work with some of the grapevine that I brought back from Arkansas with me on the last trip. So that's the next step. I'll actually disassemble this stuff after I've done some layout. I'll do some rough cutting of pieces. Then I'll strip the bark off of that grapevine and then start actually inletting it into the head and footboards. Stay tuned. I think I've picked out the pieces and where they're going to go to add some decoration to a fairly plain bed. I've got them all rough cut to length. I'll need to cut another 4 or 5 inches off of them once they're ready to place. But for now, it's time to strip some bark. I have my draw knife, I have my felling axe, and I got my dog. What more could a man ask for? Let's get started. It has really become windy. I think I've got everything stripped down to about the point that I want it to be. I kind of like the modular look. On some of these smaller pieces, they had a chance to dry out more, and there's not a very thick layer of inner bark on those. So some of these pieces are going to be somewhat fragile to work with, and I'll have to exercise some extra care on those. I think I'm just about ready to start fitting those into the bed frames and coming up with what I need for joinery. Because of the wind, it's not a lot of fun being out here, and the sun is starting to get a little bit low, so I think I'll put that off until tomorrow. Join me then.